Meeting to order. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 46 du comité permanent.
Welcome to meeting number 46 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics.
108-3H and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, April 20th, 2026. The committee is commencing its study of the connection between the Minister of Finance and National Revenue and ALTO. I'd like to welcome to the committee the Honourable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Finance and National Revenue, who's with us for the first hour today. Minister, you have up to 5 minutes for your opening statement. Go ahead, please.
Merci, Monsieur Brassard. C'est un plaisir d'être avec vous.
Thank you, Mr. Brassard. I'm pleased to be here with you and colleagues today. As you mentioned, I am here today to describe the measures that my team and I have taken to prevent any potential conflicts of interest regarding the Federal Crown Corporation responsible for developing the high-speed rail project. Earlier this year, news reports suggested that someone close to me had been hired as an employee of this Crown Corporation, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Government of Canada and reports to the Parliament of Canada through the Minister of Transport. However, the relevant facts date back well before the publication of these articles. On July 3rd, 2025, the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner was informed that someone close to me had received a job offer from the aforementioned Crown Corporation. I then contacted the office directly and was told that no risk of a conflict of interest arose from the circumstances in question. Several months later, further exchanges with the office confirmed this same conclusion. Despite these repeated confirmation that no conflict of interest existed and that no screen was required, I nevertheless chose, out of an abundance of caution, to implement and maintain an ethics screen to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest and to assure Canadians of the integrity of the decision-making process, as evidenced by the letter dated September 10th, 2025, a copy of which was duly sent to the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. Colleagues, I have acted in the same manner in which I have always carried out my duties as a Member of Parliament and as Minister, with rigor, integrity, and in accordance with my obligations. I have had the honour of working with some of you for over 10 years, just like you, Chair. But I hope and believe that you will all agree that, like all of you, I have always demanded impeccable ethics from myself and my team. Nevertheless, and despite the proactive measures taken and the Ethics Commissioner's unequivocal response regarding the absence of any risk of conflict of interest, this matter has nonetheless given rise to unfounded accusations, even defamation, and partisan maneuvers. In light of these allegations, I would like to highlight several important facts. The plan for a high-speed train serving the north shore of the St. Lawrence River in the Mauricie region is not a recent development. 5 years before my election as a member of the National Assembly and 15 years before someone close to me joined the government-owned corporation, economic stakeholders in the Mauricie region were already promoting the project. In 2010, for example, the Trois-Rivières Chamber of Commerce and Industry publicly supported this initiative, considered a key project for economic development and opening up of the region. Funding for this project was also announced by the former Prime Minister Trudeau in February 2025 while I was serving as Minister of Industry, well before the events and circumstances being discussed today. As soon as someone close to me received a job offer from this Crown Corporation, the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner was informed. I contacted the office directly and subsequently received written confirmation on April 7, 2026, stating that no conflict of interest existed and that no ethics screen was required. I quote, "Given that ALTO is a Crown Corporation accountable to Parliament through the Minister of Transport, and that as Minister of Finance you have no decision-making authority over human resources matters at ALTO, you are not in a position to favour the interests of a specific ALTO employee. There is therefore no risk of a conflict of interest, and an ethics screen is not required. Despite this, I have chosen to impose an internal conflict of interest screen so as not to participate in decision-making regarding the Crown Corporation's project, except those of a general nature permitted under the Conflict of Interest Act. Colleagues, I believe we can all take pride in the fact that Canada has one of the most robust conflict of interest regimes in the world. This committee plays a vital role within that framework and makes a significant contribution to maintaining Canadians' trust in their public officials by ensuring they are held to the highest ethical standards. However, I urge us all to exercise caution. Preserving this collective trust also means avoiding politicization of the Act or the work of this committee. We cannot allow partisan considerations or broader opposition to major infrastructure projects for the country to divert this committee from the important work it is mandated to carry out. I am confident that committee members will be able to examine these allegations in a fair, objective, and impartial manner. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister.
Sir, you know that members have a finite time to ask their questions, 5 minutes. I expect the question and response to be of equal time. And I don't want or need any interruptions unless they're related to standing orders or standing rules, just because, as has been practice on this committee, just because you don't like a line of questioning doesn't mean you interrupt. Mr. Barrett, you have 6. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Are we able to get unanimous consent from the committee to work through bells if they do ring during the minister's appearance here, just because I expect that he has a limited amount of time?
Okay, so we do have unanimous consent to work through bells. Okay, we'll do that. Thank you, Mr. Barrett, for raising that point. Go ahead, sir. You have 6 minutes.
Merci de vous être.
Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Minister.
Opportunity to discuss this issue. You appeared at the Committee of the Whole. I asked you questions. I regret that the responses weren't they weren't answers to the questions, and today I'm hoping that we can drill down and get those responses. In September of 2025, you wrote a letter. It was reported that you wrote a letter to the Prime Minister because you believed there was a risk of a conflict of interest. To be clear, I'm not asserting that you said there was a conflict or that one did occur, but you wrote that letter to the Prime Minister. Is that correct?
Écoutez, comme je l'ai dit d'abord, Monsieur le Président,
As I said, I want to comply with all the rules. And because of my legal background, I decided to impose a screen by an excess of caution to ensure that I am following the rules. And I wanted to ensure that we were taking all the measures possible to ensure that there was no conflict of interest, and I was ready to use the ethics screen and to not be a part of decisions regarding the project.
That being said, you did go on to then participate in votes in the House related to Alto, and you did go on to introduce a bill that included measures specifically related to Alto, the implementation legislation for the High-Speed Rail Network Act, and you there's no recusal publicly posted with respect to cabinet decisions or discussions, so we're left to understand that you didn't recuse yourself there, and you've said to us today that you're operating with a keen eye to follow all of the ethical rules and guidelines and to exceed them. If that's the case, and you were of the view in September that a conflict would exist if you participated in decisions, discussions, or votes, in spite of the response from the Ethics Commissioner, why did you proceed to do the very thing that you had said that you believed, not the Ethics Commissioner, that you believed would create a conflict?
like I said very specifically, Mr. Chair, I did that in abundance of caution, very mindful of the law and the exception in the law, but I wanted to make sure that I did not participate in the decisions with respect to this project. But I wanted to refer to the principle of general application, which I know my colleague, Mr. Barrett, being a solicitor and I think a barrister would know. The principle of general application contained within the Conflict of Interest Act allow me to participate in parliamentary debates and votes, including those which are related to the budget and the Budget Implementation Act. I think you even received testimony in front of this committee that this is a principle that exists not only in the federal law, but in provincial law. It's widely accepted. So not only I complied with all the rules under the Act, but I went beyond to provide to Canadians that kind of transparency, that they know that not only I respected the Act and the letter of the Act, within the exception permitted under the Act, but also
Minister?
to have a filter to make sure that I was not directly involved in decisions.
So I'd like to know what it is that the precautions that you took actually prevented you from doing, because you did go on to do those things that you believe to be of a general application. But your department went on to hire one of the many Alto executives to participate in the preparation for your budget presentation and preparation of your budget speech. It's a small world, it's a small country in terms of our population comparatively, but my goodness, it leaves people questioning how it is that an Alto executive ended up helping you prepare your budget speech and your budget presentation, working for you. I couldn't imagine they could find the time even to do that while they're preparing this massive project for which these same executives are collecting massive bonuses for without having laid an inch of track.
Well, comme je disais, Monsieur le Président, j'ai respecté l'ensemble comme.
As I was saying, Chair, I followed all the rules. And in abundance of caution, we used the screen. And Chair, this measure is well known. It's appropriately applied by the Clerk of the Privy Council. It allows us to go beyond our legal obligation. And I did this voluntarily because I thought it was the right thing to do. Now, regarding the employee in question, Chair, again, we followed all the rules. That person had left the Crown Corporation a few months before that, and the screen was already in place regarding the screen to avoid my direct contributions on the project was already implemented. That employee had a role in communication in French.
Question. What did the screen prevent you from doing if you were able to discuss, to vote on, if there were all of these Alto-related intersections with your responsibilities, what did this screen that you said was invoked out of an abundance of caution, what did it actually prevent you from doing?
Very quick response.
I will try, Mr. Chair, under your direction. Well, the screen, like I said, is a mechanism well established by the Privy Council for ministers and others to not participate directly in specific matters.
Monsieur le Ministre, Mr. Barrett. Madame Lapointe, 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup,
Ms.
Monsieur le
Lapointe,
Président.
you have 6 minutes. Thank you. Welcome, Minister. It's always great to see you. I've been a vice chair at the committee here for about a year. We've done a lot of work in the past year. As you said earlier, it was one of the promises in the electoral platform to have this Alto high-speed rail. As you know, my riding is south of Mirabel, and so I am very aware of what's going on with the Alto project, and I could speak about it at length, and I have done so. It will be going through my riding. It's a project that most Canadians support. We need to find a way to respond to people's questions. Earlier, you talked about our conflict of interest regimes and how it's one of the most robust in the world. Many witnesses have confirmed that here at the Ethics Committee. I have a question, and take all of the time that you need in order to give an explanation. Minister, can you explain to the committee why you judged that it was important to act proactively and to consult the Office of the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that you respected all the rules? Thank you, Ms. Lapointe, for your leadership with this project. I have often been asked questions, but the high-speed rail project, the Chamber of Commerce of Trois-Rivières is asking for groups to mobilize in order for the high-speed rail to go through the North Shore. This was an article published in Radio-Canada on February 15th, 2010. So when I say that this is a project that's been talked about for years, this is 5 years before I was elected to the federal parliament. So there's a lot of public information surrounding this project. And if you go to Transport Canada's website, Chair, you'll see the mandate given to that Crown Corporation. It's one of the it's the most major project in Canada at this time. I've been a member of Parliament for about a decade now, and I've always acted with integrity. I've always wanted to follow the rules as MP, as minister, and I wanted to go above and beyond. I wanted to use that ethics screen to not participate in decisions that had a direct impact on the high-speed rail project. I thought it was the right thing to do. As a lawyer, I was director of ethics for about 5 to 8 years when I worked in London before joining politics. So I have intimate knowledge of processes that need to be implemented, yes, in the public service, but also for larger businesses. And the trust that Canadians have is important. I did this because I wanted Canadians to trust in our system. We have a regime, as you said, that is one of the most robust, most exhaustive of the G7 countries and of OECD countries. And given all of that, I understood the decision by the ethics commissioner, and he gave me quite a lengthy response. And this is in response in an email. There is no risk of a conflict of interest. The screen is not needed. And this is a communication that was sent to me when I asked to confirm, and that was received in April 2026. So, following the rules is important, and as a minister, I wanted to go above and beyond and use the screen. And as I said to Mr. Brassard and members of the committee, this process has been established for a few years now. I have seen many screens of this type used at different times, and I think it's the right thing to do. I think that the committee should trust that in this file, we acted in the interest of Canadians, and that is why I'm here to answer questions today. You decided to show an abundance of caution to maintain Canadians' trust regarding Alto. Can you explain why this approach was important to you personally? Well, ethics is a fundamental value in my view. As I said, I was a director of ethics when I was a lawyer working abroad. So maintaining the public's trust is important. That's the role of the chair, Mr. Brassard. That's essential in our deliberations, and that's why I said we can't politicize the issue here at this committee. We can't politicize the act or the work of the committee because it will impact public's trust. There are some who have not been here as long, but some of you I've been around for 10 years. And we have to flag when things are going well. In this case, you have a member of parliament who is following the rules and who is going, in fact, beyond that. I think that that's the kind of approach that needs to be celebrated. Thank you for your candor. Thank you, Ms. Lapointe and Mr. Champagne. Monsieur Bonin, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Minister, you talked about the ethics screen. Could you share that with the committee? What it stops you from doing? Could we have a concrete example? Or again, we have to be careful regarding what's said at committee. The commissioner received the letter. He said, you gave us a copy of a letter. Mr. Champagne, I'm talking about the screen. I'll come back to the letter after. But can you share the screen with committee so that we can see it? It seems to be clear to you, but it's not clear to me. Documents are available through the Ethics Commissioner. They're not available on the Commissioner's website, and so I was wondering if you could make that screen available to the committee. You've made mention of it. The letter was shared with the Commissioner. It's the legislation that's responsible for these principles. If the Ethics Commissioner decides to give you a copy, he will have to make that decision. But as a minister, and you're talking about transparency, you don't want to share your screen with the committee? Again, the letter was sent to the Commissioner. There are legal rules around that. I consulted the Commissioner, and the Commissioner will make the determination. Point of order, please, Chair. Point of order, Chair. The Minister has not refused at any point. I just want to come back to what was said by Mr. Bonnet. The question has been asked many times, and the answer was clear. You can get that information through the Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Sarri. Mr. Bonnet. He did not answer the question. My question is whether or not he can share the screen. The interpreter would like to flag that she cannot interpret when multiple people are speaking at the same time. Your letter, can you share it with the committee and including the response of the Commissioner, because it's not available on the website? Again, there are rules regarding the communication of documents with the Ethics Commissioner. He confirmed that he received the letter. Is it normal that after all of that time that the letter is not available online? I would say that it follows the rules that are in place. I did this voluntarily. The screen is administered by the clerk of the Privy Council, and so I did this voluntarily. I sent it to the Ethics Commissioner. If he decides to share it with you, it'll be up to him. I understand, but it would have been good for you to share that because of transparency being so important. Because an appearance of a conflict of interest will undermine the trust that Canadians have. You tabled a bill, C-15. This bill includes elements on Alto that includes expropriation measures. Why did you not simply remove that part on Alto from that omnibus bill? That the Minister of Transport have to deal with that, and that way you wouldn't have to testify or vote on it. You could have recused yourself or removed that Alto element and included it in a different bill. Then there wouldn't have been any appearance of a conflict of interest. Chair, I'm going to quote a message that came from the Office of the Ethics Commissioner. The Commissioner on April 7, 2026 at 4:36 p.m. said, given that Alto is responsible to Parliament through the Minister of Transport, and because as Minister of Finance you don't have any impact on human resources at Alto, you could not have an impact on that person, and so there is no conflict of interest and the screen is not required. That was in the words of the Commissioner. Thank you, Minister. But the Commissioner stated that you have no decision-making power on HR decisions for Alto. But that's not the only issue. The issue is that you're a government making decisions for Alto that has extraordinary expropriation powers and that can lead to an appearance of a conflict of interest. That's what we're talking about here. Do you not see that people could be asking questions? Your wife is a VP and you're making important decisions that would give Alto expropriation projects and billion-dollar contracts will be signed. So I understand that they're saying that you don't have an impact on HR decisions at Alto, but do you not see why people might think there's a conflict of interest? Again, Chair, allegations were made that are false. I would invite Mr. Bonnet, who is not a lawyer, to consult a lawyer, because you're making allegations that are non-founded. Inaudible for the interpreter.
Monsieur Bonnet, laissez le ministre répondre parce que...
Mr. Bonnet, you're going to have to let the minister respond because the interpreters cannot interpret two people at the same time. I came to testify before this committee, and I focus on the facts. I'm a lawyer. I share the facts. Allegations were made, and they're false, and they're non-founded. The legislation is clear. You can look at Section 6.1 and 6.2 on the conflicts of interest, and they will help you analyze the situation further. Also, and I could come to, I see that you're telling me to move on, but I am compliant to all of the rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, you moved, spoke on, and voted on measures to advance the ALTO project through the Budget Implementation Act in various ways and means motions. Now, you spoke about matters of a general application. I want to specifically look at the February 25th, 2026 vote in which you voted in the House of Commons against motion number 44 to delete clause 191. Did you voted against that specific motion, correct?
Mr. Chair, like I said, I comply with all the obligation under the Act. And
the answer, Minister, is you did vote against that motion. That was very specific to delete clause 191. Now, what was in clause 191? The High-Speed Rail Network Act, to delete that from the Budget Implementation Act. Now, Minister, just to confirm, the High-Speed Rail Network Act dealt exclusively with ALTO, correct?
Monsieur le Président, comme je l'ai dit, je me suis toujours conformé.
As I said, Chair, I have always followed all of the rules. My colleague understands as well 6.1 and 6.2, Section 6.1 and 6.2 of the Act on Conflicts of Interest.
Dealt specifically with the High-Speed Rail Network Act, and that act dealt exclusively with ALTO. So you said that the ethics screen was in place to prevent you from making decisions, discussing, or voting on matters related to ALTO, with the caveat that that did not extend to matters of a general application. Motion number 44 was not a matter of a general application. It was very specific. It was specific to advancing the ALTO project, nothing more and nothing less. Isn't that right?
Monsieur le Président, encore là, comme je dis, je me suis conformé.
Chair, as I said, I followed all the rules, and my colleague, I believe, is a lawyer. I would invite him to look at the different modalities of the legislation and the jurisprudence on general application rules and conflicts of interest, and how it allows MPs to participate in votes and debates. This is a principle that is well established not only here in Ottawa, but is included in provincial legislation, and it's among best practices.
Minister, if that isn't specific, if that doesn't relate exclusively to ALTO, then what could be more specific than that? Than a clause to delete advancing the project?
Monsieur le Président, comme je l'ai dit, moi, je me suis conformé à toutes les...
As I said, Chair, I followed all the rules, and I would invite my colleague, I think he's a lawyer, in fact, to read the legislation and the jurisprudence regarding general application rules.
And it's not...
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Je comprends la réponse.
Thank you, Minister. I understand your answer.
What good is your ethics screen if you can vote on matters that specifically and exclusively relate to advancing the ALTO project? And by the way, your spokesperson, John Fracos, is quoted in an April 6, 2026 National Post article stating, quote, "The minister fully respects the screen," meaning he is neither implicated in nor party to any discussions, decisions, or votes related to ALTO. That is simply not true. You voted at least 13 times on matters related to ALTO. You qualified that by saying that it was a matter of a general application, but then you can't explain how it is that you voted against motion number 44, which was not a matter of a general application.
Minister, I'm going to give you time to respond to that. You've got
Merci,
55
Monsieur le
seconds.
Président. Comme je l'ai dit, le principe d'application générale...
The general application rule allows members of parliament to meet their obligation and allows them to vote, because the people from Saint-Maurice Champlain have the right to have me vote. They elected me. But in his interpretation, given that he pays no attention to the jurisprudence, experts spoke to this, so the people from my riding have a right to all of this, and this is why I followed all the rules and all of the exceptions included in the legislation.
Cooper, that's effectively the end of the time. Mr. Chang, 5 minutes, go ahead.
Can you confirm discussion regarding high-speed rail began long before your election to Parliament and long before you became Minister of Finance? Yes or no?
Oui, effectivement, M. Chang, écoutez, il y a un...
Indeed. I quoted it from Mr. Bonnet because I know that he reads Radio-Canada articles, but one said that the Chamber of Commerce from Trois-Rivières is asking elected officials and organizations in Mauricie to mobilize in order to move forward on this light-speed rail in the North Shore, and this is from 2010. So, the high-speed rail project...
You live where I live. You've been hearing about that project for 2 decades at least, you know, and as an MP, because I have the right to discharge and I have the obligation to discharge my duty to my constituent, I have come to know that project before I was even elected. This is 5 years before I was elected, you know, and way before, obviously, I became Minister of Finance. Like I said, if you've been living in that part of the country, you've been hearing about that project, that not only you've been hearing about it, but as you said, you heard me quoting, but the Chamber of Commerce and civil society has been asking for a project like that. But when I took my role as Minister of Finance, I had to put the proper safeguard in place, which I did. But like I said, I have knowledge of the project just because of public knowledge. It's very well known in my parts of the country.
Thank you, Mr. And can you also confirm that the entity now known as ALTO was created in 2022, several years before the events being discussed today, and at the time when you were serving as Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry?
Ouais, écoutez, moi je vais lire parce que vous savez, moi devant le comité de l'éthique, il faut être très...
As you know, we need to share facts at the Ethics Committee. So, I have the mandate that is available online. It says, in March 2022, the Government of Canada published a mandate for Via Rail to focus on a high-speed rail, and also includes ALTO. It also mentions that the high-speed rail project is one of the most important in Canadian history, and it would take about 1,000 kilometers of rail, and this is a very readily available online. This is public information.
Sure. And for the benefit of this committee, could you clarify the reporting relationship between ALTO and the Government of Canada, and which minister is responsible for the oversight of the Crown Corporation?
Ben, écoutez, ça me donne l'opportunité, puis je vais le faire en anglais parce que je
I'm
pense...
going to respond in English because I think it's great to have it in both official languages.
Read in extenso an email of the 7th of April, 2026, 1637, and I'm quoting, considering that ALTO is a Crown Corporation accountable to Parliament, to the Minister of Transport, and as Minister of Finance, you have no decision-making authority over matters of human resources at ALTO. You do not have an opportunity to further the interest of any specific ALTO employee. There is no risk of conflict of interest, and a screen is not required, end of quote. So I just want to be very clear about the facts, because I think when you're at the Ethics Committee, and there's a number of lawyers in this room, you have to stick with the facts and make sure that whatever you state in this committee is factually correct and is substantiated by evidence, that's why I brought the documents to substantiate what I'm saying with evidence so that people can form their own opinion.
Thank you, Mr. And could you explain what ALTO would mean for Canada's long-term economic growth, productivity, and connectivity, and what would Canada lose by not moving forward with a project like this?
Bon, vous comprendrez que dans les circonstances, je vais me limiter.
You'll understand that given the circumstances, Mr. Cheng, I will limit myself to what's publicly available. On the Transport Canada website, there is public information. It's an initiative. It will extend over 1,000 kilometers. attain speeds of 300 kilometers an hour. It will relay Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, Trois-Rivières. So if you want additional information, you can find it on Transport Canada's website. This allows people to better understand this major project. And this is something that we've been talking about for at least 20 years in my writing.
You'll note that the bells are ringing in the chamber. We had UC at the beginning to continue on. I'm going to give everybody 10 minutes to go upstairs. We're inside the same building. Mr. Bonnet, vous avez...
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Is it possible to open the television just to look and have the time?
I'll make sure that the clerk does that. Monsieur Bonnet,
Merci.
2 minutes, 30 secondes. Commencez, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Bonnet, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Could you ask the witness to give us the letter that he sent to the commissioner, including the screen?
Si nous besoin de...
If we want the letter, we need a motion from the committee, and the committee needs to support the motion. So it's not up to me to ask the minister to ask for that. That is not my responsibility as chair to ask for the production of that letter. So I would then propose a motion that the committee requests that the minister make the letter public and the ethics screen that was applied. I think that it is of the public's interest. That was the motion moved by Mr. Bonnet. It's now open for debate. If there are no comments, we can move to a vote.
We're going to go to the vote. Do we have unanimous consent on the part of the committee for the minister to produce the documents that Mr. Bonnet has asked for? We don't? Okay, so let's go to a vote then. Madam Clerk, call the vote.
The vote on the motion just moved by Mr. Bonnet.
Wait.
Mr. Alsaud. Ms. Jagger.
Oh, his commentary from the chair.
Mr.
Wow.
Chang.
No.
Monsieur Sari.
No.
Madame Lapointe.
No.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Monsieur Hardy.
My mic is on and I say yes.
Monsieur Bonnet.
Oui.
Yeas 4 pour 4. Nays 5 contre 5.
Okay, so the motion for the minister to produce the documents to the committee has been defeated. Monsieur Bonnet, 25 secondes. C'est tout.
Monsieur
That's all the time
Champagne,
you have left. Minister Champagne, I think that the executives at Alto and your wife is a part of that. Did they receive a bonus? Do you know if she received a bonus? Chair, I'm not sure what the member is speaking of. But what I can say is that the letter was received by the Ethics Commissioner, and it was confirmed by the Commissioner that he received the said letter. The Ethics Commissioner had all of the information, and he will have to decide. Thank you, Mr. Bonnet. Mr. Hardy, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Minister, for being with us. You talked about rigor, integrity, transparency. You said that your goal was to respect your obligation, so you sent a letter to recuse yourself. The definition is to remove oneself from a potential conflict of interest. So can you tell us about why you recuse yourself given that definition? If you're looking for a clip, you're not going to get it today. I've been here for 10 years. You just arrived. I'm an honorable member of this House, not you. I'm ready to respond to your questions on facts. But this is a fact. This is a dictionary definition. I would want to know why you recuse yourself. Just let me, this is my time. Chair, point of order. Can we give the minister the time to respond for the interpreters, please? Again, Mr. Hardy, if you have another question, go ahead. We're talking about facts. You send a letter to recuse yourself. The words are important. People are listening to us. They want to know what happened. And you have to go through the definition. So, where did you see a potential issue? That's what I'm asking. I'd be pleased to answer your question. I did it by abundance of caution. I'm a lawyer. I understand. Even though the commissioner didn't tell me to do that, I can decide to go above and beyond what's in the legislation in order to avoid any kind of conflict of interest regarding the Alto project. Great. I'm glad that we're focused on facts. So September 10th, you sent a letter, September 2025. The commissioner's response came in April 2026. You gave the response earlier. So there's quite a break between the two, a delay. So you recuse yourself and you wait to receive the answer. But in the meantime, on November 4th, you participated in debates, you voted. November 18th, you promoted the project. You voted many times in November and in February. 13 times between you sending in your letter and the official response, you acted in a way that you weren't supposed to, technically. So what happened between the letter and the response? That's not true, Mr. Hardy. You'll see the definition of the general application rules. There are very specific measures in the legislation. I just wanted to correct you there because we're dealing with facts. So April 2025 or 2026 confirmed a discussion that I had with the commissioner. When that person received a job offer, so July 2025, we wrote to the commissioner. And then I took other measures because I have a role as an MP, I have a role as a minister, and I have to follow the rules. I'm happy that you mentioned that. You said it's important to maintain trust, that we can't politicize the ethics committee. But when you do this, people have questions. They ask, how could a minister accelerate a project, spend billions of dollars, have directors of that project, have $2.8 million in bonuses, and these are executives. So is your wife an executive at Alto? Again, Chair, these are allegations. There are allegations in the question. I would invite you to consult. Yes, you are making allegations. Your wife works for Alto. You're making allegations, Mr. Hardy. What allegations? You're making allegations that are false. What allegations? What is the allegation that I'm making that's not true? Verify what you're doing with lawyers. You're making allegations. You're politicizing the work of this committee. If you're against the project, that's fine. For those who are listening to us, they understand exactly what you're doing. You're against the project. You're politicizing. I'm not politicizing anything. I'm asking you for facts.
Okay, let me deal with this. Hold on, Minister. Okay, I don't need 6 chairs on the other side or 5 chairs on the other side. You let me deal with
What?
it. Okay? You need what? Say that again.
Yeah.
You need a good chair. Is that what you're suggesting? That?
Wow.
Okay, thank you,
What do we do with that?
Mr. Hardy. Mr. Hardy.
Donc les faits.
Go ahead with your question. I'm giving you extra time too. Go ahead.
Je sais pas en quoi je politique.
I don't see how I'm politicizing this issue. Executives at Alto received bonuses. I'm asking you whether or not your wife is a part of the Alto executives. That's the question. Because if Canadians know that that's the case, they know that your household will benefit from that money, and you're going beyond the general application. Mr. Hardy, please give the time to the minister to respond. Thank you, Chair. I understand that at committee sometimes things get heated, but as you said, we all need to stay respectful. Mr. Hardy, I'll answer you, and I will quote the Ethics Commissioner, because you're making allegations, and you should consult lawyers. The Commissioner said, given that Alto is a Crown Corporation accountable to Parliament through the Minister of Transportation, And that as Minister of Finance, you have no decision-making authority over human resources matters at Alto. You are in no position to favor the interests of a specific Alto employee. There is therefore no risk of a conflict of interest, and a screen is not required. You have a right to your opinion, but the Commissioner is the one who speaks to that.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, it's great to see you as always. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. Now, I'll take a quick moment to note, I don't know that I've ever met anyone who appreciates being in committee as much as you do. This committee certainly appreciates that about you. Now, for the benefit of this committee, I'm going to take a quick moment to rehash the timeline here with you. In March 2025, you're appointed as Minister of Finance. Congratulations, by the way. You're doing a very good job. Last spring, someone close to you received a job offer with Alto. You immediately contacted the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner to inform them of said job offer. You are subsequently told by the Commissioner's office that there was, and I quote, no risk of a conflict of interest and that a screen was not required. Notwithstanding that advice, you still chose to impose an internal screen to avoid any potential or perceived conflicts of interest. In September of 2025, you wrote to the Prime Minister informing him of the implementation of a conflict of interest filter. And then in November 2025, C-15, the Budget Implementation Act, is tabled. In February 2026, C-15 passes through the Finance Committee, with Conservatives voting yes in favor of Alto. And then in March 2026, the Leader of the Opposition announces opposition to Alto, and that brings us to today. Have I got this timeline right, Minister? Am I missing anything, perhaps?
I think it's, to the best of my recollection, you've got the great chronology of events.
Happy to hear that. And at any point, has the Commissioner expressed concerns as to your approach or indicated that it's insufficient, that there's something missing?
No, and I appreciate your question, Mr. Chair. I just want to say, again, I know that it's not easy, especially when there are debates in this place, and I want to thank you for the work you're doing, Mr. Chair. But I think, what I hear from my colleague, Mr. Al-Sood, is a recollection of events and facts, and I think that's what this committee is all about. It's about facts. Members of Parliament are entitled to their opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. That's a very clear principle that we should be applying at this committee. And it's a matter of justice, and, you have to abide by these rules. And like I said, that's why I like your question, because you're talking about facts and you leave the opinion aside. And like I said, people who know me and people have seen me in many different positions, and I've been a member of this House for a long time, I think as long as the chair or even we came elected at the same time. Whether it's in question period or in committee, I've always submit myself to questions and answer to preserve public confidence in our institution and the important work. Everyone is doing important work. As much as it might be difficult sometimes to be a witness, and there's things that you hear that you'd say they may not be factually correct. Witnesses are coming here to answer your questions, as it should be the case, and I've submitted myself to that many, many times, and I've answered probably as many questions as probably I look around this table more than most, and so I've been accountable to Canadians, I've been accountable to Parliament, I've been accountable to committee, and I will continue to do so, because I think this is how our system is working, and I want to thank again the chair for the work.
We're 3 rounds in now, and I'm still trying to understand what you might have done differently to somehow be even more transparent. You were repeatedly told that no screen would be required, that no conflict of interest is in question. You still chose to do a screen and to recuse yourself from any interactions pertaining to Alto. Why did you make that decision? What principles guided that decision? Well,
listen, I know as a lawyer, but also as being director of ethics, that sometimes it is my own choice to go beyond, to avoid any perception of any conflict, despite the fact that the arbitrator, and for Canadians who are watching tonight, there's maybe different views who's asking the questions and the lead up to that, but the arbitrator of what the code is asking of me, as much as anyone in this room, which is at the table, is the commissioner. He's the arbitrator of all that. None of us are. He is. And when an MP does everything he can, contacting them, proactively contacting the commissioner, asking him for guidance, asking him for advice, the advice is being confirmed in writing. Then you put a screen and you voluntarily copy the commissioner, so he would have the copy of the letter, so he would be able to say to anyone whether he's satisfied or not. And then he confirmed reception of that letter. I would say, humbly to this committee and to you, Mr. Chair, when one has done everything that one can do to respect all the rules that apply to me and all these members around this table, one should take stock of that and say someone has done what he should do, and we should not politicize the rest, because that's not the role of this committee. I appreciate people may have different view about different things, but this is about, the rules, the articles that are in the code, and the arbitrator, which is the commissioner.
Okay, thank you, Mr. El Soud. Mr. Hardy should be able to take us up to 5 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll have one more round of 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Hardy.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Moi, je suis juste un simple kinésiologue.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a kinesiologist, and I've been here for about a year. I'm not a lawyer, but there are things that I find strange, and I wanted to ask questions about it. I'm happy that you talked about the commissioner, because the commissioner asked us to include the appearance of a conflict of interest in the legislation, and the appearance of a conflict of interest is what we're talking about here. So we want to include it in the report. We have just asked for a document, but you have all refused that we access this document. You're saying that it's so clear, why can't we have it? But all the Liberals just voted against. My last question is on your speech. $12,000 for a speech written by somebody who works for Alto. Perhaps my question is simple. How can you ask an employee to write a speech that has to do with promoting the company that they work for and then having taxpayers pay for that? So how do you influence, how is that going to influence the project? Mr. Hardy, I have a lot of respect for you, and I'm happy that there are a lot of people like you who are coming to Parliament. But again, you're making allegations, and I'm asking you to be prudent. Did you not pay $12,000? You made allegations. That person was not an employee for a long time. That's why I'm saying it's allegations. Well, how much time? That's what's concerning. I'm trying to help you because you're making allegations. For those who are watching us, they've heard these allegations, and they're unfounded. There would be an objection if we were in the courts, because you don't have any facts. That person had left for months. We followed all of the rules regarding contracts. The screen was in place. So that's why I'm saying that you should be prudent. I understand that you have the right to ask questions, but I do invite you to be cautious, because you're saying things that are not true. Well, the proof is that that person, if she had just left but she worked for Alto, or they work for Alto and you paid $12,000 for their speech, I understand that you're saying, well, the legislation allows you to do certain things, but Canadians are watching this and they're losing trust in their institutions. And you said that your role is to maintain trust in institutions, but unfortunately, since I've been here, Liberals are always putting themselves in positions where people start to wonder. You have a responsibility, Mr. Minister. That's your opinion, Mr. Hardy. I meet a lot of Canadians who don't share your opinion, and that's why we need to make a distinction between opinions and facts. That's your opinion, and if you're making allegations, just make sure that you can back it up. You need to share facts. We have a privilege to be here at this committee. This is the Ethics Committee, and facts need to lead. Did you pay $12,000? Did you pay someone $12,000 to write a speech? That's a fact. Again, that's an allegation. You're talking about the Department of Finance, and we paid for a service from someone who helped us to ensure that the French in the speech, but also in the entire budget process, so that person helped us ensure that everything was done correctly, and that follows all of the rules. And it happened in previous budgets as well. So you are saying because of the rules, you hired someone who cost $12,000 to verify the French, and you'll see that elsewhere? That's not what I said. And again, you're making allegations. But I'm trying to understand your response. If I can't understand, imagine for other Quebecers. People understand what you're doing. People know what you're doing, and people will see what you're doing. You have a right to ask questions, but you can't invent facts. You have a right to your opinion. I'll give you that. But you can't invent facts. 45 seconds, majority. $2.8 million were given to Alto, to executives for bonuses. Is that not true? Even though nothing has been built yet. Is that a fact? Can you share the answer? Chair, I'm here to speak to issues regarding what the committee invited me to speak to. I've repeated it many times here and in the House. For those at home, the Conservatives asked me questions for about an hour last week. I answered all of their questions. I'm doing it again today, and I think I'm showing transparency, Chair. I answered all of their questions.
And while we attend to votes, we'll be back, and Liberals will have 5 minutes when we get back, and that'll conclude the first hour. Votre
Thank you
patience.
for your patience. We're going to resume the meeting. The minister stated that he can stay for 2 additional minutes for questions from Mr. Bonnet and then Ms. Chagger. Mr. Bonnet, you have 2.5 minutes for your questions to the minister. Apologies, Chair. My earpiece is broken. I haven't started your time. 2 minutes, 35 seconds. Minister, you often talked about how or talked about what the commissioner said, that there was no conflict of interest regarding the internal management at Alto. That's what you said. But the issue is not the internal management at Alto. The issue is whether or not the government's file with Alto could have a conflict of interest. That's what's important. So you asked, well, is there a conflict of interest regarding the internal management at Alto? Have you asked whether or not there could be a conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict of interest, given that your wife is an executive at Alto and that could perhaps impact how this portfolio was managed at government? Did you ask that? Again, you're making allegations, Mr. Bonnet, and I advise that you be cautious. But what I'll say is that if you look at the Conflict of Interest Act, that was not the question that I asked the commissioner. And the commissioner will be able to speak to this later. He didn't say there wasn't a conflict of interest. He said there's not a risk of a conflict of interest and the screen is not required. Those are his words. That's what he shared in April 2026. He said there's no risk regarding the internal management at Alto. That's what the commissioner said. I'm reading what he said. He said there is no risk of a conflict of interest. I think that answers the question. Not only is there not a conflict of interest, he said there's not even a risk of a conflict of interest. That's why he said that the screen is not required. So I was saying that the question was more general, but he focuses on the legislation. He implements the legislation, and that's the answer that he gave me following consultations that I had with him. 15 seconds. Coming back to the screen that you implemented to ensure that you were transparent, Mr. Sabia shared the Prime Minister's screen that ensures that there's no conflict of interest, and he shared that. Are you still refusing to share your screen? Quick response. Again, I shared it with the Ethics Commissioner, and I'll let the Ethics Commissioner decide whether or not to share it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bonnet. Ms. Chagger.
Oh, Mr. Sarek, sorry.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Je m'excuse.
Il n'y a pas de souci. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Sari, apologies. Thank you, Chair. And before I ask my question to the Minister, I would like to remind everyone that it's a pleasure for me to be here at this committee. One of the goals as an elected official is to ensure transparency at our institutions and maintain trust in these institutions. We want to not focus on clips and undermining trust. I would like to repeat that the Minister was very proactive in how he managed this file. If you'll allow me, Minister, can you share the facts? Just to ensure transparency and for the good of our institutions, can you state this again? Because sharing these allegations and things that are not facts are not going to improve transparency or trust in our institutions. Thank you for the question. I always try to be candid, but I always want to also share facts. The Ethics Committee is a special committee. Canadians' trust is important. I followed all of the rules, and I explained some of the modalities of the legislation that were perhaps less well understood by committee members given the questions that they asked, so that I could shed a light on everything. I just wanted to shed a light on certain things, as I said. I said that there were allegations. We need to make a distinction between allegations and facts, or opinions and facts. At the Ethics Committee, you need a lot of rigor. Things are said, you have to analyze things, insinuations can be made, and that's why I maintain facts, and I'm very specific in my answers because Canadians expect that from those who testify. Again, the legislation is clear, and I chose to go above and beyond what is required in the Conflict of Interest Act, I implemented a screen. This is a well-established practice through Treasury Board for ministers. And so I was compliant, and I also informed the Office of the Commissioner. Because when you follow the rules and go beyond them, well, beyond that, it becomes politicizing an issue. There are other ways to express a disagreement. If you disagree with a project, the Ethics Commission is not the place to debate it. That's why I focused on the facts tonight. I wanted to ensure that Canadians understood, because you play an important role regarding Canadians' trust. If you have different opinions on projects, that's fine. People have different opportunities to share those opinions. I would like to thank committee members and the chair for giving me the opportunity to share the facts and inform Canadians of these facts.
Thank you, Minister. I guess it's important.
1:30 left. Just so you're
Perfect.
aware.
Thank you. I think it's important that we really appreciate you for being here, actually for more than an hour, and that means a lot. You came here with evidence because you know the importance of this topic, which I think actually raises the level of transparency. You were proactive. You've done everything right, raising the bar once again to ensure that you represent your constituents and Canadians well. That means a lot to me. And I agree with you. People cannot make up their own facts. And clearly, both opposition parties are making allegations. And I do believe that's unfortunate. I just want you to let members all hear anything that you think is relevant, because I actually just know that these are the messages you've been sharing. You've been open. Not really sure why you're here, because we've got a country to run. But just want to give you the last word. Thank you.
45 seconds.
45. So I just want to start with you. Thank you for your statement. Thank you, Chair, for your leadership and your chairmanship of the committee. Thank you also to the opposition member. I mean, what I was asking today is to be treated fairly, and that's what every Canadian would expect. I came here with evidence, with facts. I want to say thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to present them to Canadians so that they can have the facts. And I want also to thank the Commissioner because he's the ultimate arbitrator of these things. I want to thank him and his team for the work that he's doing on behalf of Canadians. And again, Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity to put the facts on the table. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes our first hour. And I do appreciate the fact that you did spend some extra time with us, despite the motion calling for an hour. We're going to suspend briefly, and then we've got the Ethics Commissioner coming in. This meeting is suspended. everyone back to our second hour today. We've got witnesses from the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. With us today is the Commissioner, Conrad von Finkenstein. With him also is Lisa D'Amour, who's the Director, Advisory and Compliance, and Michael Aquilino is here, who is the Legal Counsel. Commissioner, I invite you to have 5 minutes for your opening statement to the committee. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Monsieur le Président, chers membres du comité.
Chair, members of the committee, I am pleased to appear before you. I am accompanied by Lisa D'Amour, Director of Advisory and Compliance, and Michael Aquilino, Legal Counsel. The subject of the motion that brings me before the committee today revolves around a potential conflict of interest with the Finance Minister.
Votes in support of ALTO and high-speed rail. It has been suggested that he is in conflict of interest because those decisions and vote could benefit someone with whom the minister has a close relationship, a vice president of ALTO. Mr. Champagne is subject of conflict of interest act in his role as minister. Under the Act, a public officer holder is in conflict of interest if they exercise an official power, duty, or function that provides an opportunity to A. further their own interest, B. further the private interest of their relatives and friends, and C. improperly further the private interest of anyone else. Il y a trois points importants à considérer.
There are 3 key points to consider. 1. The minister has no control or authority over ALTO. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of a Crown corporation that reports to Parliament through the Minister of Transport, not the Minister of Finance. 2. That the exercise of the minister's official duties and functions does not provide an opportunity to further the private interests of any specific ALTO employee. Decision-making authority over human resources resides with the management of ALTO. ALTO is a Crown corporation that is not part of Minister Champagne's portfolio. Thus, he cannot direct nor influence it.
Means of furthering the private interest of an ALTO employee, he is not required to refuse or abstain from discussions, decisions, debates, or votes related to ALTO. In short, the minister's involvement in discussion or decisions that may benefit ALTO is simply too remote to provide an opportunity to further the private interest of an ALTO employee who has close ties to the ministers. Sometimes it is reasonably foreseeable that a public office holder could be involved in discussions or decisions where they have a potential conflict of interest. In those cases, our office works with them to set up a preventive compliance measure, such as a conflict of interest screen. We then post such screen on our public registry. Nous n'avons pas exigé que le ministre mette en place.
We did not require the minister to establish a screen, as the concerns regarding the ALTO employee are so remote. The minister, however, proactively created such a screen without input or direction from our office. He advised the Prime Minister of the screen and copied us. As this was not a screen required by our office, we did not publish it in the public registry.
Happy at any of the committee's questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're going to start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Commissioner, the Finance Minister was just here at committee, and in his final minutes on the question of the correspondence between you and him being released, he said, and I quote, "I'll let the Ethics Commissioner decide if he wants to share it," end quote. So the minister has said that it's up to you, because we know that normally you would say it's up to him. And so we've got that Spider-Man cartoon with the 2 Spider-Mans pointing at each other. So the minister says it's up to you. Will you decide, as the minister has said, to share that correspondence?
No, it's not up to the minister to interpret the Act. The Act says quite clear that everything that is given to me is confidential. If the person who gives it to me releases it, I will comment it, etc. Until such time as he releases it, I cannot comment on it. I have the copy from the letter. As he quite rightly said, he copied me in the letter to the Prime Minister. It's in my possession. He's publicly commented on it. He has not released it. The function of releasing is up to him, not to me.
The in your first in your explanation of why the minister wasn't in a conflict, you said in your first point that it was a file for the Minister of Transportation and not a file belonging to the finance minister. But it was in his bill, so he introduced it, and the Budget Implementation Act contained all kinds of things, but it also specifically contained the enabling legislation for Alto, the creation of the High-Speed Rail Network Act. Without that enabling legislation, Alto wouldn't proceed. Does that change the calculation on who has ownership of it when the finance minister could put forward his own legislation, but the minister, the transport minister could have put forward his own legislation, but the finance minister decided to do it under his auspices instead?
Well, that's an arrangement the cabinet ministers may make as to who introduces a bill. The fact is the bill provides that there is Alto, and that Alto is part of the Minister of Transport. Whether the bill authorizing that is introduced by the Minister of Finance or Minister of Transport does not change the relationship. The relationship is that it's a Crown Corporation reporting to the Minister of Transport. Minister of Transport is responsible for it and answers to it in Parliament.
Okay, so for the creation of it, we understand your interpretation. But with respect to the minister voting specifically on clause 191 of Bill C-15, which was a vote to delete clause 191. It would have removed the High-Speed Rail Network Act from the Budget Implementation Act, and the minister voted specifically on that item. The minister said he did so because it was of a general application. Are you of the same view?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, he is voting on a piece of government legislation, and specific parts of that government legislation. And it is that government legislation piece would create a Crown Corporation. If it had been deleted, the Crown Corporation would not have been created. That's fine. It still has nothing to do with him. That Crown Corporation, once it is created, belongs to the Minister of Transport. He does nothing like every other member of Parliament who voting on a part of the Budget Implementation Act. That's his duty.
The minister himself said that he believed he would be in a conflict of interest were he to participate in debates, discussions, decisions, or votes related to Alto. And he said that in a letter to the Prime Minister in September of last year. Now, you've made public comments about your opinion, and you've made public comments in response to his comments on the advice that you've provided him. Are you able to provide us with the time frame in which you first provided or furnished him with that advice, that he would not be in a conflict?
The minister quoted to you from the letter, and he gave you the date. I mean, Michael, what's the date?
Well, the last one was from April 7th, 2026. That's
for the first time, if I may, Chair, through you to Mr. Aquino, the date of the first correspondence on the matter.
Do you have that?
I believe, as the minister confirmed, it was August, September, but we would have to confirm the date. But the dates that the minister provided were in line with our understanding.
Because it was in September that the minister said that he believed he was in a conflict of interest. He would be in a conflict of interest if he were to do all of the things that he went on to do. Now, it was the minister's belief, and obviously you have since provided him with advice that was contrary to that. Were you asked if a recent or current executive at Alto could provide work on the budget speech or presentation? Was that something that the minister or his office asked you for advice on with respect to whether or not there would be a conflict of interest?
Quick response.
You know what? As I keep telling you, what the minister advice that he seeks from us and we give him is confidential. He can disclose what we advised him, and he has. And so, therefore, what do you expect me to say? I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I don't quite understand the gist of your question.
Maybe we'll return back to it, Madame Lapointe, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. Merci,
Ms.
Monsieur.
Lapointe for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Welcome to our witnesses. Thank you for helping us with all of this. Commissioner, can you explain the preventive role that your office plays when a minister or public office holder seeks advice before acting? Ministers can always consult us. They will explain the situation to us and ask whether or not there's a conflict of interest. They ask what they can do, what they should not do, and ask whether or not there are measures to protect themselves. Once they have explained the situation, generally we will tell them whether or not there is a conflict of interest, and if there's a conflict of interest, we could propose certain measures. For example, in this case, the screen. And so with this screen, a minister would not participate in a discussion or decisions that would cause a conflict of interest. Is this a best practice that a public office holder consult your office proactively when they want to ensure that they are respecting all of their obligations? Yes, that's what we encourage people to do. Our role is to facilitate the work of MPs and to help them avoid conflicts of interest. We want to help them avoid any problems and not create any. François-Philippe Champagne, the finance minister, chose to recuse himself voluntarily. But when a screen is not required, is this an approach that could reinforce trust? Let me explain our policy on screens, on the ethics screen. If there's a possible conflict of interest, a person needs to recuse themselves. And that recusal will be published on our website. That's very public. There's also the possibility of establishing the screen. That screen is administered by 2 people who will ensure that a minister does not take part in a decision or discussion on a given topic that would cause a conflict of interest. That is a requirement. We spoke to, or rather, once everything is done, the results of the screen are published on our website. It's like the screen for the Prime Minister that is managed by Michael Sabia and his Chief of Staff and the Clerk of the Privy Council. Minister Champagne implemented a screen voluntarily. We told him clearly that it wasn't necessary, but as he said, out of an abundance of caution, he decided to implement a screen. He notified the Prime Minister and wrote to my office. This is not a screen that we required, and so we do not publish it on our website. In some cases, if a minister says that they would like to do that because of a potential appearance of a conflict of interest, they don't want to undermine trust, then in that case, if there could be an appearance of a conflict of interest, then we'll say, okay. send the screen. I'll publish it on the website. But to be clear, that is not something that we required. It's something that you requested. We do it as a courtesy. We publish it as a courtesy. It's not something that we had required. It's not something that we controlled or that we would enforce. Thank you for that explanation. So it was to avoid an appearance of a conflict of interest. There was no conflict of interest, but to ensure that he dealt with the potential appearance of a conflict of interest, that's why he voluntarily used the screen. He can do that. And if he asks me to publish that, I will. Minister Champagne did not ask me to publish the screen online, and so we did not do so. Thank you. Another question for you, Commissioner. How did your office decide that there was no conflict of interest between the finance minister and Alto, the high-speed rail company? A brief response, please. Alto is a crown corporation. It's part of the transport minister's portfolio. It has nothing to do with the finance minister. The finance department funds many different things, but he is not responsible for Alto. Thank you. Mr. Bonnet, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, when was it that the minister asked for your advice regarding the situation? Can you give the dates, please? As the minister said, it was in August 2025. That was the first time that he reached out to the office. And that was a letter that he sent? It was a conversation. And when did you respond to the minister? He asked for your advice. When did you respond? I think that there was a discussion with our office. And there was an email sent in the fall. I didn't get an answer. I'm asking questions here. It was a verbal discussion? Yes. So in August 2025, he asked for advice. You responded when? During the discussion. If I understood correctly. So he reached out in August 2025, and in that discussion, you said that there was no conflict of interest in your view? So he asked the question, and you said right away that there was no conflict of interest? So that was in September? September, I would like to know the dates. When was that? When did you say that there was no conflict of interest? There were a few discussions. I think that my colleague had asked for this. Can you give us the chronology of events? Because things aren't very clear right now. I'm a bit surprised because you knew that you had to testify today. Microphone, please. The advice that we give is confidential. Only what the minister says publicly is something that we can comment on. The minister was here. He quoted the letter that my office sent to him, and it states explicitly that there was no conflict of interest with Alto. That was the letter. There were discussions before that to confirm the facts, but all of that is confidential. We can only comment on what he mentioned, and he mentioned the letter. You're saying the letter in which you say that there is no conflict of interest. When was that letter sent? September 11th. So that's in September. And then the minister has the Budget Implementation Act. There's a big portion on Alto and expropriation, and it includes expropriating quickly without consultation. You were not aware of that information when you gave your advice. You didn't know that there was going to be a Budget Implementation Act and Alto and its extraordinary expropriation powers. These discussions were confidential. What I can share to you is the letter that we sent, but everything that he did was what a finance minister needed to do. He didn't create Alto or it's up to a finance minister to table bills that fund projects. You said that that Alto falls under the transport department, and then the finance department has something completely new, extraordinary expropriation powers, and so it can push a project forward. And knowing that, do you not think that there's an issue? I understand that you had already made a decision. Government decides on projects and the measures that need to be taken. But do you not recognize that there is an element that the minister is responsible for? But how does that make a conflict of interest? Because he's allowing his wife, she's an executive on a project, they receive bonuses. They receive performance bonuses. And if the project moves forward very quickly, perhaps they would get a higher bonus. Are you saying that a minister authorized Alto in order for his partner to get a job? Inaudible for the interpreter. I want to ensure that there is no appearance of a conflict of interest. You're not talking about an appearance of a conflict of interest here. Inaudible.
J'ai donné un peu plus de temps.
Mr. Bonnet, I gave you a bit more time because other members had a bit more time as well. But now your time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, who in your office worked with and provided advice to Minister Champagne in respect of his potential conflict of interest in relation to Alto?
The person who was assigned to him, like everybody, every minister has a specific person assigned to him or her, who is this contact person.
And who is that person?
I don't identify my employee. It's my office that does it. It's not a single employee. This is a contact person. Okay. He or she then consults with others.
Then let me ask you more specifically, was Martine Richard involved in providing advice to Minister Champagne?
As I say, it was a general opinion. It's the position of the office that was conveyed by the person assigned as his advisor. Okay. Madame Richard is my top legal advisor. Whether she was involved in this or not,
yes. Well, she's also the sister-in-law to Dominic LeBlanc, and on April 7th, 2026, Mr. Barrett sent a letter addressed to you in relation to concerns about potential conflicts of interest involving the minister's involvement in voting on and moving various budgetary motions and the Budget Implementation Act in relation to advancing the ALTO project. Was Ms. Richard in any way involved in reviewing that letter?
I'm sorry, I am Ms. Richard is my legal advisor. She has disclosed the fact that she is the sister-in-law of Mr. LeBlanc, and anything involving Mr. LeBlanc and his conflict, she is filtered out. We have a filter inside, and she does not touch it. And
She doesn't touch what, Commissioner?
I beg your pardon?
She doesn't touch what?
Anything that has to do with Mr. LeBlanc or questions of conflict of interest regarding.
But she is your senior general counsel and with the responsibility for investigations and legal services. So I presume that any time there's a letter written to your office requesting an investigation, that would come across her desk. Is that fair?
Of course it would.
Okay.
But as I said, if it has anything to do with, when anything comes in that it concerns Mr. LeBlanc.
I understand. I understand, but you've answered my question that Mr. Barrett's letter would have come across her desk and she would have been involved in providing advice to you in respect of...
I didn't say what she would have assigned it to somebody, whether it was handled or not, but I don't know why the internal workings of my office... Did she assign it to
someone else, or was she involved?
I'm sorry, but I am not disclosing to you the people who work in my office and so that you can hold them out as having made mistakes or not. I'm responsible for the invoice that's given in my office, and I take responsibility for it.
It is rather...
Mr. Cooper, go ahead,
It
please.
is concerning that we have a sister-in-law to the minister, LeBlanc, a senior minister in this government, involved with responsibility for investigations that would have been involved, or at least the whole issue surrounding Minister Champagne coming across her desk in relation to the very specific issues raised by Mr. Barrett in his letter of April 7th, 2026. Now, now moving on, because my time is limited, you...
Got a minute, Mr. Cooper.
You stated that there was no conflict because it was remote and it was a matter of a general application. But I would challenge you on that insofar as that Minister Champagne's spouse is an executive at ALTO. ALTO is a Crown corporation that exists solely to build the ALTO high-speed rail line. That's its raison d'etre. That's why it exists. And Mr. Champagne, on February 26, didn't just vote on any general matter touching upon the budgetary process or the Budget Implementation Act that happened to touch upon ALTO. He voted against a very specific motion that would specifically have removed the High-Speed Rail Network Act from the BIA, which would have killed the advancement of the project going to the heart of ALTO, of which Minister Champagne's spouse is a VP. I would put it to you that that's not remote. I would put it to you that that is not of a general application. I would put it to you that there is a very direct link between that vote, that decision, and the private interests of the minister's spouse.
I'll take that as a comment because you're out of time, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Casey, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, please. What's that? I've got Chong or Casey here second. So, Mr. Al-Sood, go ahead. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being with us today. My first question, Commissioner, did the minister voluntarily approach your office for guidance?
Yes.
Okay. And is that common practice?
Yes.
Fantastic. And is it unusual for a minister to implement safeguards beyond those recommended by your office? How often does that happen?
Relatively rare, but it hasn't. We have had requests like that.
Okay. And you concur that the minister has gone above and beyond his requirements as it pertains to the Conflict of Interest Act? Fantastic.
We told him quite clearly there was no conflict of interest. He felt out of an abundance of caution. As he testified to you, it would be useful for him, and he wrote to the Prime Minister and copied me.
Fantastic. Commissioner, could you explain your role under the Conflict of Interest Act and how allegations of conflict are typically assessed?
Well, they can come they can come from the member of the public, can come from another minister, they can come from an MP. What happens is people write to me and say there is the following situation, etc., and we think there is a conflict of interest and you should investigate. We get quite a few of those. We look at it and we try to apply the test of the set out in the act. Is there any evidence, or is there anything that could reasonably amount to a conflict of interest? If so, then we decide we can investigate. We will investigate, and first of all, we write to the person and say, these allegations have been made. Can I have your opinion? I get your response from the person, and on that basis, if the response is good enough, and if we decide no, there's really nothing, or else that really doesn't satisfy me. There is still a reasonable doubt here that something is not amiss, and then we do have the ability to start an inquiry, and we have the full power of a court to ask for the persons to come and satisfy under oath, where they produce documents, etc., and then we issue a report.
I understand the scope might be quite large, but what factors are typically used to assess whether there is a conflict of interest?
Well, what factors? As you look at the act and you look at the various three factors that I satisfied, is did the act of the minister or the function he did, whatever he did it promote his private interest? Did it promote the private interest of his relatives or friends? Or did he improperly do something for a third party? And the key is there improperly. It wasn't just his normal action. He went outside normal action to do something improper.
Now, without discussing any confidential information beyond what's already public, could you describe the sequence of interactions between your office and the Minister of Finance regarding this matter?
Okay, but I think
just to have it on
my colleague who's in charge of that section can walk you through it.
Yeah, for the reasons of confidentiality, I mean, we can confirm what the minister said in his appearance, which is that he approached our office in August. There was a series of conversations, and then, he was given the advice that the commissioner has confirmed that, in our opinion, there is no conflict of interest, no measures required. And then in September, as the minister outlined, he provided us with a copy of the letter, indicating that he was putting in place a voluntary measure.
Fantastic. Have you revisited your conclusions at any point, Commissioner?
No, I mean, there was no reason to revisit it because, as I said now several times, it is so remote that there is no link. This friend of the ministers is a vice president of Alto. That's all. And Alto is one of the many crown corporations we have, which he doesn't report to him on anything, etc. So to suggest that he, as Mr. Cooper says, tried to establish, he voted to keep Alto alive and funded so that his friend would have a job. I mean, where is the connection? Where's the evidence? This is just so remote that don't follow down that line.
In assessing this matter, did your office examine whether the minister had decision-making authority over matters affecting specific Alto employees?
Of course not. He has, even the Minister of Transport has. It's whoever runs Alto, the president of Alto, the HR people Alto. They deal with their employees. The minister doesn't, and certainly not another minister. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Al-Soud. Monsieur Bonnet, si tu veux, tu prenais 5 minutes.
You can take 5 minutes if you'd like. Thank you, Chair. You were saying that if the minister wants you to publish the letter and the screen, you would do so. That's what I understood. Earlier, he said that it's up to you to decide if you wanted to publish it. He said if you wanted to, you could. Does that not mean that he wants you to? That's the first time I'm hearing that. If he calls me or writes to me and says, I would like for you to publish this screen, and he could tell me why. If it's to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest, I don't see it, but I will publish it, but I will indicate clearly that it's not something that we required. We are publishing it because he requested that it be published because he finds it important. But you heard him say that here. Would you be able to follow up with the committee if once you have verified that the minister is in agreement that it be published? I did not receive a request on his part. It's up to him to send the request, and if he does, then I'll publish it. He said if you wanted to. That's what he said. So will you follow up with him? Maybe he doesn't want it to be published. Well, it's up to him to decide. You said that there was no conflict of interest. I still have questions, though. You said it's in the Minister of Transport's portfolio, but clearly it's not only the Prime Minister or the Minister of Transport. The Finance Minister gives expropriation powers here, and should that not have been in a different bill? If that was under the Transport Minister, I would have understood, but the Minister of Finance was responsible for the bill that has an impact on the Alto project that would allow the project to move forward more quickly. I don't understand. It's not that he's responsible. Where is his conflict of interest? In tabling a bill on Alto and the high-speed rail and expropriation. I don't see the conflict of interest. But if there's no money for Alto and it doesn't move forward, unless I misunderstood, then his wife no longer has a job. As I responded to Mr. Al-Soud, Alto decisions were not made in order to give Minister Champagne's wife a job. You can perhaps doubt my opinion, but I had to make a decision. I'm going to come back. You said here that the Conflict of Interest Act and the appearance of a conflict of interest is important, and you would like for the appearance of a conflict of interest to be integrated in the legislation, but you're saying here that there is no conflict of interest. That was your call. But do you not think that there's a potential appearance of a conflict of interest in this case? Honestly, no. I don't see an apparent conflict of interest. We're talking about a high-speed rail and linking that to the finance minister saying that it's all there to create a position for the wife. I don't see the link there. 20 seconds, Mr. Bonnet. The screen that we talked about, you cannot publish it yourself. You have to ask for the minister's agreement first. The minister can ask that I publish it. You can't do it without his approval. Thank you. I can publish those that are important for the public in order to build trust. I don't see what the connection is here.
Monsieur Hardy pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Hardy, you have 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. What we're seeing here is always quite interesting. We see the Liberal intention. You need 4 Liberals to bring you back to order as soon as things get a little bit difficult. They always feel like they have to intervene. What would the world be like without the Liberals? That is the question. But now I'm going to focus on facts. That's what the minister asked us to do earlier. I think that it's important to ethics, and it's our role here. Our committee and your office exist to ensure that there are no ethical issues and to ensure that Canadians maintain their trust in our institutions. I think that you agree we need to maintain trust. The minister recused himself and then self-applied an ethics screen. We know that we talked about September 10th, 2025. That's when the letter was sent to the Prime Minister. And we were made aware of this April 7th, 2026. It's quite a gap. The minister voted 13 times. No screen was required. You didn't require a screen. The minister decided to implement one, and there was a reason for that. When we're told to stop inventing things, and he said we shouldn't make false allegations. But as parliamentarians, how can we ensure that Canadians can trust the system when nothing was made public and we only find out after the fact? How can we ensure that things are done ethically when your office can't even tell us when a screen has been, or when a screen has been activated, so that we know whether or not it was truly activated? How does that work? Because I feel like we're going around in circles. When we require a screen, we publish the information online. Everybody knows the context. If not, I will launch an investigation if needed. In this case, that's not the matter at hand. We didn't require a screen. The minister decided to do this himself. This had nothing to do with us. He needs to defend himself to you. But I didn't require that. I understand. I understand that there are rules, and you came here to tell us that an appearance of a conflict of interest should be added to the legislation, and I see that you want to be proactive. But how can people trust their institutions when somebody applies their own screen, does not follow it, and then you say that there was a screen, but nobody can access the discussions, your proposals? And earlier, the minister was here, and he said that it's important to be transparent. It's important to ensure that people maintain their trust. But he could ask you to publish all those discussions. Would that not help Canadians' trust? You didn't require it. He did it himself of his own volition, so perhaps people should know that there's nothing to hide. He came to say that it's up to you to do it, but now you're saying that no, it's up to him. Would it not be beneficial for him to just reveal the entire process? You're asking me to comment on the actions of a minister and what he did voluntarily. The screen has nothing to do with us. We didn't ask for one. That's not my question. But what were the results? Does it help the Canadians' trust? That's what you want me to comment on. But I want to know if you think it could help, because we asked him earlier. Everybody, the Liberals voted against disclosing that. But do you not say that it would help the public's trust that we have access to this information? It would be relevant for the Ethics Committee to see that everything was, in fact, done correctly. If he wants it to be made public, he can ask me to. I would like to come back to the general application rule because I think it's important. Mr. Hardy? 15 seconds. 15 minutes? No, 15 seconds. You have 15 seconds. You could come back to that because we're going to give the floor to Ms. Jagger, and we have enough time for 2 other rounds of 5 minutes for the Conservatives and the Liberals.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for being back into the team. And just, I guess, helping Canadians kind of understand what you do. And I think just to take it down to the basics, are you able to share when the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner was initiated?
As you know, remember, it was part of the Accountability Act that Prime Minister Harper brought in. And under it, the Accountability Act was actually contained 4 separate acts, and one of them was the Conflict of Interest Act.
And my understanding is that it was established to prevent conflicts between the private interests and public duties of federal officials.
Yes. Yeah.
And so are you confident that the office continues to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it does more than what you just said. It obviously wants to avoid conflict, but it also recognizes that good people, capable people, are needed in the public service. But good people and capable people have conflicts, they have networks, they have interests, etc. So you have to accommodate them and find a way that they can come in, serve the public, share their knowledge and wealth with for the public good, and later on exit. And also when they exit, that they don't take advantage of what they learned in the. And so the Act tries to do this whole thing, try to, number one, bring good people in, make sure there's no conflict, make sure that they can exercise it, but they can, afterwards they exit, they don't use the information improperly. But on the other hand, you want to make sure that you do it at a minimum, so people aren't completely cut off from their environment, their contacts, their networks, etc. And it's a balancing act. And we do that all day long. We balance it. What is here? We want to make sure the public has confidence, but on the other hand, you don't put restrictions or limitations on people which are not necessary.
And so can you tell me why Canadians should trust your office?
Well, because this is, they should trust us because we are totally non-partisan. I was appointed by Parliament. You all voted for me to take this job, and and my people try to look at the Act, look at the spirit of the Act, and apply it in such a way that it creates harmony. That's our goal, and that's our task.
I also want to just thank you for not disclosing people in your office because it's tough. And when we're at the temperature of politics that we're becoming accustomed to, it's really hard for certain people to have private lives. And disservicing those individuals doesn't help. And we've seen a massive attack on individuals for serving in certain roles. So I just want to thank you and your team for the work you do. Can you tell me why you believe the general application rule exists and is needed?
Well, because if it would be very difficult otherwise to really govern. There's because they always you make a rule regarding income tax, let's say, or something, but it may benefit actually your husband because of some change in that. Does that mean you shouldn't be voting on Income Tax Act? No, the Act applies to everybody. It so happens it also touches your husband negatively, but 100 of other people. I'm just making this up, to illustrate the point.
The Federal Court of Appeal has confirmed that conflict of interest screens represent a reasonable exercise of your authority under Section 29 of the Act. Do you agree with that finding?
As I mentioned, otherwise you always have, if you have a conflict, you have to recuse yourself. If the recusal gets published, it becomes a big deal. Rather than why go that way? Just make sure you don't get involved in decisions that can create a conflict of interest, and then we put the screen on there. We said we put that in place to make sure that on these areas this person can't participate in decisions or discussion, and so for there's this if by accident the screen doesn't work and you actually, as a person gets involved, then he or she has to recuse himself.
And there's repercussions to that.
Yeah.
So not everyone gets to find a life partner in life, but it appears that the approach that the official opposition and the third party are taking, that anybody who chooses to run for office needs to be single. And is that reasonable?
No, the act makes it quite clear that it applies to your family and to your friends, and also to your common law partners.
Thank you. Monsieur Hardy, 5 minutes.
Merci.
Oui.
J'aimerais.
Thank you. Can you tell us why the minister decided to impose a screen on himself? You can't tell us? Because there's an article that says why. He was here. He could have told you. I think he did. It was out of an abundance of caution. There's a reason. The minister perhaps saw that there could be a potential conflict of interest. It came out. I just wanted to ensure in asking the question because I was told that I was inventing facts. So what was shared in the media is that his wife is a VP at Alto. So he saw that there could be a problem, and that's why he imposed a screen on himself, because there could be a perception of a conflict of interest there. You talked about the general application rule, and it was mentioned many times. If execs are giving themselves bonuses, and these bonuses will benefit the household, is that still of general application, whether we're talking about Alto or any other project? If a minister has an impact on a project that will put money into his household or into their household, is that still of general application or no? I'm not saying that it's premeditated. I'm saying, is this still of general application? You're asking a real hypothetical. It's not hypothetical. Well, we would need to look at all of the aspects of the situation to see whether or not there is a conflict of interest. But there could be. It's possible. Depending if you give me a concrete example with facts. So at that point, there would be an ethics screen. So a limit would need to be imposed because there were decisions that would impact one's family, and then it's no longer of general application. If there's a conflict of interest, the general application rule does not apply. The rule starts with the situation where it's a general decision that could have an impact on your partner or your family, but it has an impact on everyone as well. I understand the concept, and you said it earlier, if it's in one's interest. So if it's in the interest of a friend or a partner or of anyone with close ties, well, that could be potentially problematic, so a screen would need to be implemented. So I'm just trying to understand how many steps are needed before you say that there is a conflict of interest. In the legislation, the minister tabled the budget, giving accelerated powers to this project. His wife is a part of this project, but you said there's no direct link, it's under the Minister of Transport, but this project gives bonuses to its execs. So how many steps do we need before you say that there's a conflict of interest? If you're saying that there's no conflict of interest here, then we could do anything, that the general application is really, really general. The Minister of Finance has a large portfolio. Budget decisions have an impact on all of government. There will have implications for many people. So nothing could be a problem then. Well, what's the connection between one and the other? If you can explain a direct nexus, well, that's my question for you. I'm trying to question this whole process. You're talking about a general application rule. It's a Minister of Finance. I understand that you make choices for the country. So every decision that a finance minister makes, well, you can say, well, it's in the budget. It's going to have an impact on everyone. How can we ensure that Canadians know that there's a commissioner who is independent, who will be able to ensure that these kinds of ethical situations don't arise? Thank you, Mr. Hardy. A brief response, please, Commissioner, if you can. No? The legislation has the general application rules. It's in the Act. I get to interpret it and apply it. We could have differences of opinion on this specific case, but the rule is there. And we need to apply it when it needs to be applied in order to ensure that we maintain the public's trust.
Je vais donner...
I'll give 2.5 minutes to Mr. Bonnet, and then Ms. Lapointe will have 5 minutes. Mr. Bonnet, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Earlier, you said that the minister said that he was putting in place this screen to ensure there was no conflict of interest. You can make that published. You could make that public. Yes. If he asks me to. If he asks, can you make it public without him asking? The commissioner has to follow the rules of the legislation. Unless the screen is required, any information that is given to us is confidential. That's not what I understood earlier. He cannot make it public unless it is required by the legislation, or that information remains confidential. Section 5110, I can publish specific things and any other document that I deem relevant. Explain, please. There were articles in newspaper. We want more transparency. We want people to trust their institutions. Should people not be able to know that there was a solid screen, that the minister did his job, ensured that there was no conflict of interest? You have the opportunity to make this public and rebuild trust, but you don't want to do that because you don't think it would help transparency? There's a provision that says that all conversations with the minister are confidential. Both provisions are in the law. It's confidential unless I've been asked to publish it, unless the minister asks that it be published. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Bonnet. Ms. Lapointe, you have 5 minutes. Thank you again to the witnesses for being with us. Thank you for shedding a light on this topic. As you said, the Act is there and needs to be applied honestly for everyone, whether it be for us as members of Parliament, ministers who are public office holders. I will give you the floor. Is there anything that you want to add, questions that you weren't asked, any clarifications that you would like to make? I've said to this committee before, it's been 20 years since we had this legislation, and it has not been modernized. We need to modernize it given that it is very outdated. Thank you. What you've said is very important. We should be focused on what our committee needs to do, including reviewing the Ethics Act, the Lobbying Act, the Conflict of Interest Act. We need to focus on that instead of worthless studies. It can't be a witch hunt. We need to be focused on what we need to focus on. For the past year, we have focused on things other than the work that we need to do. So if I understand correctly, you're saying that we need to review the Conflict of Interest Act and update it to 2026 standards. Thank you.